Well, welcome back to another installment of Reading with Mr. Henry. We're going to cover a lot of ground today. We just read Act 4, Scene 5 in the previous video, and today, right now, we're going to cover Act 4, Scene 6 and 7. 6 is quite short, 7 is a little long, but this is where it gets complicated. And so let's go right to it. Everybody open up to Act 4, Scene 6, and let's roll right into it. It's on page 307 in the Barnes & Noble edition. Act 4, Scene 6. Enter Horatio and a gentleman, a random guy. Horatio. What are they, aren't they, that would speak with me? Seafaring men, sir. They say they have letters for you. Well, let them come in. The gentleman exits to go get them. And he says, I do not know from what part of the world I should be greeted, if not from Lord Hamlet. And some sailors enter. Now remember, where's Hamlet? Didn't he board a ship with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern for England? Sailors enter. God bless you, sir. Horatio. Let him bless thee too. Shall, sir, and please him. There's a letter for you. Sir, it came from the ambassador that was bound for England. That would be Hamlet, right? If your name be Horatio, as I am let to know it is. And Horatio takes the letter from him, opens it up, and reads, Horatio, when thou shalt have overlooked this, read it, give these fellows some means to the king. They have letters for him. And so that's his first command was, these guys have letters for Claudius, make sure that they get to him. And then he explains what's happened. Ere we were 2 days old at sea, a pirate ship of very warlike appointment gave us chase. Finding ourselves too slow of sail, we put on a compelled valor. In other words, the Hamlet ship is battling with a pirate ship. And in the grapple, I boarded them. In other words, Hamlet went on board the pirate ship. On the instant, they got clear of our ship. So I alone became their prisoner. So you're following that. Hamlet jumped on the pirate ship to battle them, and all of a sudden, his ship parted. Hate when that happens. Let's see how it ends. They have dealt with me like thieves of mercy, but they knew what they did. And so they understood once they figured out who Hamlet was. I mean, imagine a bunch of pirates and all of a sudden, we've got the Prince of Denmark. And so he says, they knew what they did. I am to do a turn or a favor for them. In other words, if you're pirates and you realize you've captured the Prince of Denmark, you're not going to kill him. You're going to use him for some favor down the road. And so he says, in the letter, he tells Horatio, let the king have the letters I have sent, and repair thou, come thou to me with as much speed as thou wouldst fly from death. In other words, he's saying, once you get those, make sure those letters get to Claudius, come to me. Well, where does that mean Hamlet is? That means Hamlet is back in Denmark. And he says, I have words to speak in thine ear that will make thee dumb, yet they are much too light for the bore of the matter. Side note 1. The bore of a gun refers to the diameter of its barrel. Hamlet's words, though horrible enough to render a man speechless, would still be inadequate to convey the full significance of the matter. Okay, just as 2 small bullets would be inadequate in a large gun. In other words, after those letters have been delivered to Claudius, come to me, because I have stuff to tell you that I can't even write down. And so he says, these good fellows, the messengers, the sailors, will bring thee where I am. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern hold their course for England. Of them I have much to tell thee. Farewell. He that thou knowest thine, Hamlet. Horatio says, come, I will give you way for these letters, and do it the speedier that you may direct me to him from whom you brought them. And they all exit. Scene 6 is done. Act 4, Scene 7. We're back to Claudius and Laertes, and here's where the Machiavellian Claudius manipulates Laertes for his own purposes. Watch. Act 4, Scene 7. Enter King and Laertes. Claudius. Now must your conscience my acquittance seal, accept my innocence. And you must put me in your heart for a friend, since you have heard, and with a knowing ear, that he which hath your noble father slain pursued my life. In other words, he's presuming that Laertes has now heard the truth, that not only was King Claudius not guilty of killing Polonius, but that Hamlet was. And he's trying to make an ally out of Laertes. He says, you've probably heard that Hamlet has tried to kill me. Okay, which he's kind of overstating that. And Laertes says, yeah, it well appears, but tell me why you proceed not against these feats so criminal and so capital in nature. In other words, it's a good question. Hey, as king, why have you not done something about Hamlet? Why have you not punished him? And so he says, as by your safety, greatness, wisdom, all things else, you mainly were stirred up. And Claudius explains, there are two special reasons, which may to you perhaps seem much unsinewed, but yet to me they're strong. Here's the first reason. The queen, his mother, lives almost by his looks, and for myself, my virtue or my plague, be it either which, she is so conjunct to my life and soul that, as the star moves not but in his sphere, I could not but by her. In other words, I can't punish Hamlet badly because his mother loves him dearly, and I love her, therefore I can't punish him for that reason. And then here's the other reason. The other motive why to a public count I might go is the great love the general gender bear him, who, dipping all his faults in their affection, and again, this is Shakespeare commenting on the mass, on groupthink, and sometimes people that we admire greatly, we dip all their faults in our affection. In other words, we don't see them because we care about them or because we love them. It says, the other motive why to a public count I might not go is the great love the general gender bear him, who, dipping all his faults in their affection, work like the spring that turneth wood to stone. Now, let's look at the side note for that. Due to the rich mineral deposits in the soil, rivers in the English countryside carry high concentrations of limestone. Objects placed in the river for long periods of time become covered in residue and eventually petrify. In other words, we, as the masses, we cover up people's faults with our perceptions over time. And they convert his jibes to graces, so that my arrows, too slightly timbered for so loud a wind, would have reverted to my bow again, but not where I have aimed them. In other words, I can't punish Hamlet because the crowd, the masses love him. And if I were to punish him harshly, that would all blow back on me. And so, two reasons. Laertes says, and so I have a noble father lost, a sister driven into desperate terms, whose worth, if praises may go back again, stood challenger on the mount of all the age for her perfections. Side note, Ophelia's excellence towered over the whole world, challenging anyone to match her perfections. In other words, such a beautiful, smart, established young woman, and now she's nuts. And so he says, but my revenge will come. And Claudius says, oh, break not your sleeps for that. You must not think that we are made of stuff so flat and dull that we can let our beard be shook with danger and think it a sport. Oh, you shortly shall hear more. I loved your father, and we love ourselves. And that, I hope, will teach you to imagine. And right then, he gets interrupted. And you can see he's appealing to Laertes. I loved your father. Okay, that's going to put him on even footing with Laertes because, of course, Laertes did too. Right then, a messenger comes in with the letters from the last scene. The messenger says, These to your majesty, and this to the queen. And Claudius says, from Hamlet? Who brought them? Sailors, my lord, they say. I saw them not. They were given me by Claudio. He received them of him that brought them. Laertes, you shall hear them. And he turns to the messenger. You, leave us. And he reads Hamlet's note to Claudius. High and mighty, you shall know I am set naked on your kingdom. Tomorrow shall I beg leave to see your kingly eyes, when I shall, first asking you pardon thereunto, I shall recount the occasion of my sudden return. In other words, dear Claudius, I am back, and I'm unarmed, and I wish to see you tomorrow, and at that point I'll explain to you what happened. Now remember, hadn't Claudius sent Hamlet to England because of the fear that was building in Claudius? He's afraid of Hamlet. He's bothered by Hamlet. Hamlet is, at the very least, a burr in his saddle, and at the very worst, he's a threat to his livelihood. And now, all of a sudden, his plan has failed and Hamlet is back. Watch Claudius's response, but only for a moment. He says, what should this mean? Are all the rest come back? Or is it some abuse and no such thing? Laertes says, well, do you recognize the handwriting? Yeah, 'tis Hamlet's character, naked. And in a postscript here, P.S., he says, alone, as in, I'm going to come see you alone. And Claudius turns to Laertes and says, can you devise me? Look at the side note, it says, can you make sense of this for me? It is possible, however, that the folios advise me is the correct reading, and I would agree with that reading or interpretation of that line. Claudius, he doesn't know what to do. He's shaken. And he turns to the only person there, Laertes, and says, can you tell me what to do? And Laertes says, I'm lost in it, my lord, but let him come. It warms the very sickness in my heart that I live and tell him to his teeth, thus didst thou. Laertes is glad Hamlet's back, because that's going to mean that his revenge can come more quickly. And Claudius says, well, if it be so, Laertes, how should it be so? How otherwise? And Claudius is getting a plan here. He's very good at thinking on his feet, and he's going to now manipulate Laertes. Watch. Will you be ruled by me, Laertes? Aye, my lord. So you will not o'errule me to a peace? No, to thine own peace. If he be now returned, as, checking at his voyage, and that he means no more to undertake it, I will work him to an exploit, now ripe in my planning, under the which he shall not choose but fall. And for his death no wind of blame shall breathe, but even his mother shall uncharge the practice and call it an accident. In other words, Laertes, I'm thinking of a plan right now that will cause Hamlet to die, and no blame of it will fall on any of us. And Laertes is interested. He says, my lord, I will be ruled, the rather if you could devise it so that I might be the organ. In other words, yes, Claudius, I'll follow your plan as long as I get to be the one to pull the trigger, so to speak. And Claudius says, that's perfect. It falls right. And then he says, you have been talked of since your travel much, Laertes, and that in Hamlet's hearing, for a quality wherein they say you shine. Your sum of parts, your list of qualities, did not together pluck such envy from him as did that one quality, and that in my regard of the unworthiest siege. In other words, he's appealing to Laertes' ego. He's saying, you've been talked about since you left by lots of people in a good way for this one quality of yours that's so great. Now, he hasn't named that quality yet. And so Laertes is curious. He bites. He says, What part is that, my lord? He says, oh, a very ribbon in the cap of youth, yet needful too, for youth no less becomes the light and careless livery that it wears than settled age his sables and his weeds. Side note 4. Comfortable old age is suited by its fur coats and clothes. Okay. Importing health and graveness. 2 months since, here in Denmark was a gentleman of Normandy. I have seen myself and served against the French, and they can perform skillfully on horseback. But this guy, this gallant, had witchcraft in it. He grew unto his seat, and to such wondrous doing brought his horse as he had been encompassed and demi-natured with the brave beast. Side note 5. As if he shared one body and one nature with the noble animal, the horse. And so he's talking about a guy from France, from Normandy, who was in Denmark, and he was an excellent horseman. Now, the question is, why in the world is Claudius talking about a horseman from France? Watch. So far he topped my thought that I, in forgery of shapes and tricks, I come short of what he did. Side note. In my recreation of his feats, I fall short of the actual achievements. In other words, I can't even tell you all the great things he did on this horse. And Laertes says, a Norman, was it? Claudius, a Norman. Upon my life, Lamord. And you can look at the side note. The name has never been convincingly identified with any actual historical figure. Perhaps it's a play on words with La Mort. But Laertes realizes who Claudius is talking about. And in other words, it's like, oh, I know the dude you're talking about. He's famous. The guy's name is La Mort. And Claudius is happy. He says, ah, yes, it's the very same. Laertes, I know him well. He is the brooch indeed, and gem of all the nation. And then here's where Claudius gets him. He says, Lamord made confession of you. Side note, told us about you. And gave you such a masterly report for art and exercise in your defense, for fencing, and for your rapier most especial, that he cried out 'twould be a sight indeed if anyone could match you. So you see what Claudius is doing. Claudius is saying, yes, this most famous horseman, he spoke really highly of you, Laertes, and how great a fencer you are. Is Claudius not playing to Laertes' ego? Now watch. Again, what does this have to do with Hamlet? Here's where Claudius makes his pitch. The scrimmers, the fencers, of their nation he swore had neither motion, guard, nor eye if you oppose them. Well, sir, Laertes, this report of his did Hamlet so envenom with his envy. In other words, Hamlet was standing there when Lamort supposedly said all this, and it pricked Hamlet's envy. Like, oh, Laertes is a good fencer. Well, so am I. Okay, so watch. Did Hamlet so envenom with his envy that he could nothing do but wish and beg your sudden coming o'er to play with you? Side note, coming o'er to play, so he could fence with you. Now, out of this, what out of this, my lord? In other words, Laertes is saying, well, what's the point of you telling me all this? And Claudius isn't going to give in. He's not going to give it to him yet. He's like, Laertes, was your father dear to you? Or are you like the painting of a sorrow, a face without a heart? Well, I ask you this. Well, not that I think you did not love your father, but that I know love is begun by time, and that I see in passages of proof. Time qualifies or moderates the spark of and fire of it. There lives within the very flame of love a kind of wick or snuff that will abate it. And nothing is at a like goodness still. Nothing, look at the side note, number 1. Always at the same level of goodness. Okay. Nothing is at a like goodness still, for goodness growing to a pleurisy dies in his own too much. That we would do, we should do when we would. For this would changes and hath abatements and delays as many as there are tongues, our hands, our accidents. And then this should, this thing that we felt powerful to do, that we should do, is like a spendthrift sigh that hurts by easing. Side note 2. A sigh that does not harm even as it expresses relief. Okay. And so all of that to say, yeah, I know that you feel really strongly about revenge now, but what about tomorrow? What about in a few days or a few weeks? Will you feel as strongly then? Did you really love your father? He's baiting Laertes. And so he finishes. But to the quick of the ulcer, Hamlet comes back. What would you undertake, Laertes, to show yourself indeed your father's son, more than in words? To cut his throat in the church. Okay, stop there. Laertes is unambiguous about what he's willing to do. And just like his speech in the previous scene, he's willing to blaspheme heaven. He's willing to vow his allegiance to hell. I'll cut his throat in the church. And don't you imagine this is what Claudius was playing for. You see, Claudius sees in front of him a young man, hot for revenge. Claudius wants to get rid of Hamlet. Can't you see that Claudius sees Laertes as the tool to accomplish his own desire of getting rid of Hamlet? And Claudius then says, "Oh, no place indeed should murder sanctuarize." Look at the side note. It says offer sanctuary to a murderer. But do you see the duality, the irony of what he's saying? Claudius is a murderer too. And yet he's sort of unaware of the implications of what he's saying. And in fact, he says, revenge should have no bounds. Isn't that relevant to Hamlet seeking revenge against Claudius? Revenge should have no bounds, but, good Laertes, will you do this? Keep close within your chamber. Hamlet returned shall know you are come home. We'll put on those shall praise your excellence and set a double varnish on the fame the Frenchman gave you. In other words, I'll put some people around Hamlet who start talking about Laertes' great fencing abilities again, and then bring you in fine together and wager on your heads. In other words, I'll arrange a duel between you. He, being remiss, most generous, and free from all contriving, which is so not true, will not peruse the foils. And just to be clear, a foil is a sword. It's a really thin sword used in fencing. So that, with ease, or with a little shuffling, you, Laertes, may choose a sword unblunted, and in a pass of practice, requite him for your father. Okay, so you have to understand a little bit about fencing here. Surely you've seen fencing matches. It's an Olympic sport, typically dressed in all white with a face shield on, and they thrust and they parry, moving back and forth, and points are scored when a sword touches one's opponent. Well, the swords they use are not sharpened swords. They're blunted, or they have something on the tip, something to that effect, so as to not actually hurt the opponent. And so do you see what Claudius is suggesting? We'll slip a sword in there that's sharpened, and that way you, Laertes, can have your vengeance. Laertes says, I will do it. And as for that purpose, I'll anoint my sword. I'll anoint my sword. I bought an unction, an ointment, of a mountebank. Side note, usually this means something like the modern quack, like a doctor who's a quack. An itinerant drug salesman selling potions of little or no value. But here, Laertes obviously believes in the efficacy of the poison he has bought. Laertes he's digging on Claudius's plan. He's like, yeah, we can use the sharpened sword, and I happen to have bought a poison from some guy on the road, and I'll anoint my sword with it. A poison so mortal that, but dip a knife in it, where it draws blood, no cataplasm so rare, collected from all the simples that have virtue under the moon, can save the thing from death that is but scratched withal. I'll touch my point with this contagion, that if I gall him slightly, it may be death. Okay, so Laertes has added to their plan by saying, yeah, we'll use a sharpened sword, and I'm going to dip it in some poison. Well, that's not enough for Claudius. Claudius adds this. Let's further think on this. Weigh what convenience both of time and means may fit us to our shape. Side note, may suit our plan. If this should fail, and that our drift look through our bad performance, 'twere better not assayed. No. Therefore, this project should have a back or second, a backup plan that might hold if this did blast in proof. So not only are they going to use a sharpened sword in the duel, not only are they going to poison it, but Claudius thinks, if this fails, we got to have a backup. And so he says, soft, let me see. We'll make a solemn wager on your skills. Yeah, I have it. When you, in your motion, you are hot and dry, and make your bouts more violent to that end. In other words, get really hot, and that he calls for drink, I'll have proffered him a chalice for the nonce. Whereupon but sipping, if he by chance escape your venom stuck, our purpose may hold there. Now stop there for a minute. And so there's like a triple backup plan. And notice that this plan is all founded on deceit. In other words, he's not going to let Laertes have an open challenge to revenge Hamlet. Claudius's way, and remember, how did Claudius kill King Hamlet to begin with? He poured the poison in his ear. It's always about poison. And if you consider ways to kill people, and don't consider it too much, but if you consider it, isn't poison the most deceitful, the least straightforward, and perhaps one could say the least honest? And so they've got a plan here. But right then, Gertrude enters. She says to both of them, one woe doth tread upon another's heel, so fast they follow. Your sister's drowned, Laertes. Drowned? Oh, where? And this speech, notice that Shakespeare doesn't put Ophelia's drowning as a scene, but merely has Gertrude report it. And this speech of Gertrude's is one of the more well-known speeches in the play. And she explains, there is a willow grows askant the brook that shows his hoary leaves in the glassy stream. Therewith fantastic garlands did she make of cornflowers, nettles, daisies, and long purples that liberal shepherds give a grosser name, but our cold maids do call dead men's fingers. There, on the pendant boughs, her coronet weeds clamoring to hang, an envious sliver broke, when down her weedy trophies and herself fell in the weeping brook. Her clothes spread wide, and mermaid-like a while they bore her up, which time she chanted snatches of old lauds, as one incapable of her own distress, or like a creature native and endued unto that element. But long it could not be, till that her garments, heavy with drink, pulled the poor wretch from her melodious lay to muddy death. I'm going to go back and look at this, at Gertrude's speech for a moment. I want to be sure you understand what's just happened with Ophelia. Gertrude explains, go back. Gertrude explains there's a willow that grows in the brook. It says, therewith fantastic garlands did she make. Well, you know what a garland is. I mean, sometimes, for the Christmas holiday, we decorate with garlands, perhaps long strings of pine needle. Sometimes a garland can be a sort of circular ornament made out of various natural things that one might hang on the door. These are garlands. Ophelia was making garlands, and it says she was making them out of all manner of flowers, crowflowers, nettles, daisies. And then it says this at line 169, there, on the hanging boughs, the branches of the tree, her coronet weeds, those garlands, clamoring to hang. She was in that tree, that willow that grows by the brook, hanging garlands. And I want you to think for a minute. Why do we put garlands on anything? Well, it's decoration, right? To make something look better. Remember what's just happened to her. And does it not make some sense that that Ophelia needed to make the world look better? Because in her eyes, the world looked awful, having just lost her father, having been rejected by the boy that she may have loved. And so there on the pendant boughs, her coronet weeds clamoring to hang, so she was just up in the tree hanging garlands. An envious sliver broke when down her weedy trophies and herself fell in the weeping brook. And I want to be clear here. Does Ophelia purposefully jump in the brook? No. It was a complete accident that a tree branch broke and she falls in the brook. But look at what she does after she finds herself in the water. Her clothes spread wide and mermaid-like a while they bore her up. That makes sense. She's going to have on flowy a dress, and it's going to kind of buoy her up. She's going to float for a minute. But look at what she does. It says, at which time she chanted snatches of old hymns. She starts singing. As one, like one, either incapable of, and read the side note for incapable, I believe that's 6, insensible to, in other words, not realizing that she's in trouble, or, here's another explanation, or she seemed like a creature native and endued unto that element, that she was where she was supposed to be. Either way, she doesn't do the thing that most people would do if they found themselves having fallen into a body of water. Most people would have cried out for help, or would have swum to safety, or at least tried to swim. Instead, she starts singing old hymns. And then it says, but long it could not be till that her garments, heavy with their drink, poured the poor wretch from her melodious song to muddy death, and she sank in the water. It's clear to me that Ophelia allows herself to die. She didn't purposefully put herself there, but given the heaviness of the world around her, what's happened in her life, and I know that some of you may be thinking, gosh, how does Gertrude know such detail about how she died? Does that mean she watched or someone else watched, and why didn't they help her? We have to kind of we have to reserve our disbelief here a little bit. Laertes, this is doubly bad news, and he says, alas, and she is drowned. Too much water hast thou, poor Ophelia, and therefore I forbid my tears. Oh, but yet it is our trick. Nature her custom holds. Let shame say what it will. When these are gone, the woman will be out. Adieu, my lord. I have a speech, a fire that fain would blaze, but that this folly drowns it. And Laertes walks off. Claudius says, let's follow, Gertrude. How much I had to do to calm his rage. Okay, look, Claudius is not moved at all by Ophelia's death. All he thinks is, man, it took me all that time to calm him down and get him on my side. And he says, now fear I this will give it start again. Therefore, let's follow. They exit. And this may be, as I suggested to you, one of the most tragic moments in the play, the death of Ophelia. And we'll talk more about her in our wrap-up discussion. But in many ways, she is an emblem in this play, a symbol, if you will, of innocence blighted by the harshness of the world. I'm glad you guys joined me today. I appreciate you hanging with me with these videos, and we don't have much more to go. And so hang with me a little longer, and we'll finish up this phenomenal work. Until then, you guys have a great day.